existence. The more time the individual gives to work, the less space remains for what does not produce, does not yield, and cannot be converted into results. The person works to survive, survives to keep working, and little by little begins to confuse productivity with personal value. Nietzsche appears precisely at this point. When the individual is permanently occupied, they lose the space necessary to confront their own life. The problem is not just working too much. It is reaching the point where working becomes the only way to justify one's own existence. And when that happens, the person no longer needs to be forced to remain in the system. They begin to defend what consumes them. We learn very early, still as children, that work is exchanged for money. Nobody learns that work is exchanged for time, and that time, unlike money, does not come back, cannot be reinvested, generates no interest. We sign the contract thinking we are selling competence, effort, willingness. We only realize much later that what was really negotiated there were the mornings, the afternoons, and the nights of an entire life that only exists once. Think of an ordinary person, one of those we cross every day without paying special attention. They wake up early, face traffic, complete their shift, come home tired, sleep early to start again the next day. Multiply that by 40 years. What remains is not only the accumulated salary. What remains is the absence of everything that person could have done with that same time if it had not been bought in advance by someone else. We tend to think the problem is working too much. The real problem is deeper. It is accepting that lifetime has become a commodity available for purchase, just like any other input of production. Schopenhauer described existence as a pendulum between the pain of need and the emptiness of boredom, and modern work found an efficient way to keep that pendulum always in motion without leaving space for the person to perceive their own existential wear. You never have enough time to miss anything, because you are always too busy to notice what you are losing, and you never have enough rest to feel boredom, because exhaustion arrives before any emptiness can settle in. The paradox is cruel and simple. The more years someone gives to work, the fewer years remain to discover what they could have done with their own existence. This is not rhetorical exaggeration. It is pure arithmetic, applied to a life that has an expiration date and that most people treat as if it had infinite stock. We tend to justify this by calling it responsibility, maturity, being an adult. But there is an enormous difference between taking on responsibilities and handing over entire decades without ever questioning the price charged for them. Nobody sits down to calculate how many hours of life equal a rent payment, how many years of lost sleep equal a car installment. If someone did that calculation honestly, they would probably think twice before accepting certain contracts. The time that was never returned never appears on the paycheck. It simply disappears, month after month, without complaining, without charging, without leaving a trace. We only perceive the dimension of the loss when there is no longer enough time to recover what was given away, and then the question stops being about how much work is left. It becomes about how much has already been spent with no return, and there is no possible replacement for that specific type of expenditure, no matter how successful the career may have looked on paper. There is a scene that repeats itself in almost every office, every team, every work group, in practically any sector we can imagine. Someone receives a long-awaited promotion and everyone celebrates together, as if that were an automatic synonym for victory. Nobody stops to ask what exactly that person gained beyond a new title on their badge and a larger number on their paycheck. We were trained from very early on to see career advancement as unquestionable progress, almost as if questioning that specific movement were a sign of laziness or lack of ambition. More responsibility, more meetings, more availability outside of working hours, more demands, more targets to hit in the next quarter. And along with all of that always comes the same promise. When you get there, you will finally be able to relax. The problem is that there never arrives. There is always a next step, a next position, a next target, waiting just after the one that was just achieved. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power as the engine of human existence, but what the system did was hijack that will and point it exclusively inward toward the very structure that imprisons. The person begins to compete, to surpass themselves, to dedicate themselves to the maximum, not to expand their own freedom, but to climb one step within the same cage. The energy that could be used to question the system is channeled into winning within it. The promotion increases the salary, that is a fact, But along with the salary also increases what needs to be defended, maintained, sustained. The person who before only needed to manage their own work now needs to manage other people's work, answer for results that do not depend solely on them, justify numbers to those still higher in the hierarchy. The level of demand rises with the position, and the freedom that the promotion promised to buy remains postponed. Only now it costs more. Gradually, the person stops seeing that as imprisonment and begins to defend their own position as if it were identity. Questioning the system begins to feel like questioning themselves, because years of effort, sacrifice, and wear were invested precisely there. Leaving would mean admitting that all of that might not have been worth the price charged. The trap works because it looks like a staircase and not a cage. You climb, 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 and only when you look back do you realize that the structure beneath your feet never had a real top. It only ever had one more floor. And the next floor is already being built before you even reach the current one, waiting ready to receive the next tired version of yourself. Always a little more experienced, always a little more exhausted, always convinced that this time the top is real. Nobody holds anyone by the wrist when it comes to employment, and perhaps that is precisely why so many people take so long to recognize the prison. The modern prison does not need bars because it found a more efficient tool: the bill. Rent, financing, health insurance, the children's school, groceries at the end of the month. Each of those commitments is a rope tied to the ankle, and together they form a weight that most people carry without ever having signed any contract of slavery, because slavery of that kind does not need a contract. It only needs need. We tend to think we have freedom because legally we do. You can hand in your resignation tomorrow morning. Nobody will physically stop you. What stops you is not the law, it is survival. The salary stopped being a reward for work rendered and became an almost biological dependency, the same way the body depends on oxygen. Without it, the entire edifice that sustains a person's life collapses within a few weeks. That is where the real power of those who employ lies. It is not in paying well or paying badly. It is in knowing, with almost mathematical precision, that most people simply cannot stop. An abusive environment can be tolerated for years, not because courage is lacking to leave, but because the cost of leaving is too high to be paid all at once. Schopenhauer already pointed out that the will to live forces the human being to submit to needs that they themselves did not choose. And it is precisely that will that sustains the permanence in situations that, rationally, any person would recognize as harmful. One does not stay because they agree. They stay because the body needs to eat tomorrow, and tomorrow does not wait for philosophical reflection. The freedom to say no exists on paper, in the law, in theory. In practice, it disappears the moment the person calculates how long they can survive without that specific salary. For most people, the answer is weeks, sometimes days, and it is within that narrow margin that entire decisions about one's own life end up being made, not by genuine choice, but by lack of viable alternative. Employment stopped being an option the moment it became a condition of survival, and every condition of survival, by definition, stops being negotiable. We call it the labor market, the economy, the productive system, and all those names help to conceal the real mechanics behind them. At its core, what exists is a simple equation repeated billions of times every month: how long someone can hold their breath before needing to accept any condition to breathe again. Whoever controls the oxygen never needs to threaten. They only need to wait, and waiting alone already resolves practically any negotiation in favor of whoever can wait longer than the other side can endure. There is a small phrase, almost harmless, that almost everyone has said at some point or heard someone close to them say, "When I retire, finally, then I will start to truly live, without rush and without anyone else's demands." We postpone life entirely in the name of a future date that nobody has any guarantee of reaching, in the conditions needed to enjoy what was promised. First comes university, which consumes years of youth. Then comes career stabilization, which consumes the following years. Then comes the owned home, the children, the retirement planned with decades of anticipation. And at some point along that path, the person realizes that they spent their entire life preparing to live, without ever actually living. It is no coincidence that so many people only discover hobbies, travels, personal projects after retiring, when the body no longer responds the same way, when physical energy no longer keeps up with the mental disposition that finally became free.
Welcome, everyone. That's really interesting. I hope you got something out of it. I want to read something here. It may be accurate, it may just be slightly, but I think it is accurate. It says 55% of working Americans say they get a sense of personal identity and self-worth from their job. So you are pinning your self-identity and your self-worth to your job instead of from within, from who you truly are. Are you your job? Are you your degree? Are you your house? Are you your car? What kind of thinking is that? What if you lose all of it? Do you lose yourself? Do you become worthless? Do you all of a sudden become unidentifiable? And many times I see politicians and I see people say these things, and it feels like a thing of pride, but it's a form of control. Because nothing in this world is permanent. Not your job, not your house, not your car, not your degree. They can be all gone. But you, the child of God, you, soul, will continue to exist. But we do it all the time. I don't know if you've had this experience. Anytime you go to a gathering and someone comes to introduce themselves to you, the first question they would ask is, what do you do? It's a way they may do it innocently. But I know in the psyche, we have been programmed to size up people based on what they do. And so this creates this incentive for competition, to always wanting to go and go and get and get. And there is never an end. Never an end. What if you get to know who you truly are, so, and that your existence is as a result of God's love, not because of your job, not because of how much you have in your account, not because of your house, but that your true existence is as a result of God's love. If you start seeing yourself that way, you start seeing everyone around you the same way. We have this perverse incentive to categorize people based on race, based on looks, based on height, based on wealth, when in the eyes of the divine, none of those things matter. But Americans will do it all the time. That's the reason why we can look the other way when our neighbor is being harassed. That's why we can look the other way when our neighbors are being persecuted. Because we always feel, oh, it's not happening to me, so I'm fine. I must be in a different category. It's a lie. It's a big lie. It's what the system wants you to think. It's what the system wants you to believe. You are in a community. There's a global community. There's a national community. There's a state community. There's a local community. And of course, there's a familiar community. All of these things build, and they all affect everyone, whether we like it or not. Remember the saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. What is happening in Iran, is it not affecting us now? What is happening in Japan, is it not affecting us now? What's happening in Africa, is it not affecting us now? So what gives us the feeling that we are isolated? What gives us the feeling that we are different? Do yourself a favor. Never, ever associate your self-worth with your job, with your material belongings. Because the moment you do, the moment they're gone. And the moment you realize who you are, if you can work at it. So love each other, love your neighbor as you love yourself, love your family, love yourself, and see everything else that is material as belonging to the passing time. They are passing. They are always passing you by. Everything around you is always changing and it's always passing. Nothing stays the same. So when you understand that, you start treating people with kindness, with compassion, to understanding, with love. That is the only way we will survive as a species. That includes our pets too. Someone else's pets, our pets, their lives, including the plants, their lives too. The way you treat the lower lives, wherever you want to call them, whether they're lower or higher, is the way you treat humans. So let's do better. We are not who we think we are. We are not our jobs. We're not our degree. We're not our position in the government. We're not how many, we're not how many employees we have. We are soul, a spark, divine image of God. So are you, so is your neighbor, so is your pet, so is the homeless person. So let's do better. If you like this channel, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Until I see you next time, take care.